So welcome to another fantastic Faena Rose event. And tonight we're gonna have a very, very spicy conversation. And what we're gonna be talking about is data, the data of desire. And we've brought in none other than Alexzandra Kekesi, the head of brand and community for Pornhub. Alex, why don't you give us a little preview about what we're gonna be talking about tonight?
Sure, so I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are 130 million people that visit Pornhub every day, which means that when we look at the data, so that means things like searches, gender demographics, age demographics, what that looks like in terms of who's looking at what, when, and where. We're really able to see what that means in terms of the contemporary understanding of desire. Don't worry, it's all private, it's aggregated data, so like I don't know what you're looking at individually, but I can tell you in the lovely state of Florida, for instance, what some of the top searches are. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Fantastic. All right, well, you heard it first. As we like to say, strap in and get ready for another fantastic Faena Rose event.
So now, without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for today. She is Pornhub's head of community and brand, overseeing all external initiatives, including community outreach and nonprofit partnership. She leads the company's creative direction at the intersection of culture, art, and tech, while driving popcorn support for the adult community in the fight against sex work discrimination. Previously, as Director of Marketing, she launched flagship initiatives like the Pornhub Awards and the Sexual Wellness Center, offering resources on love, sexuality, and health. She also is the co-host and executive producer of Terms of Service, a podcast co-hosted by Pornhub brand ambassador Asa Akira. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Alexzandra Kekesi. All right, so we'll jump right to it. I think when we get started. So for those of you who don't know, Pornhub is actually constantly within the 20 most visited websites on the planet. Mm-hmm. They have an average of about 130 million visitors a day. And unlike the other websites on that list, Pornhub is one of the only ones that actually releases their data every year. Yep. And as we'd like to say, porn doesn't lie. So it's also one of the cleanest data sets that you can actually have access to about online behavior. And then so, Alex, I was hoping that you would walk us a little bit through the latest release, which was in late 24, and you've got a little bit of statistics for 25 as well, right? Mm-hmm. So...
Oh, okay.
I'll pass the controller to you. There you go.
All right. So thanks for that intro. We do release on our Insights blog the year in review, which is kind of like the big one that we do at the end of every single year. And like Alonso said, it's really kind of amazing when you consider it with the 130 million people visiting the site every day. When we look at these kind of shifts in terms of like what people are searching for, and we're also able to kind of like analyze that in terms of different demographics, so we can see what's more popular with women, what's more popular with, people ages, let's say 35 to 45, just randomly. Also in different countries, there's so much diversity and there's so much variety, which is what I think is personally really interesting. I've been with the company for 13 years now, and we've been doing this report for, I think, 12 of those years. And I've seen real changes, real shifts in what it looks like. So here we've got... these are the trends that defined 2024. So these aren't necessarily the most popular ones, but some of the ones that really stood out. I'm sure everyone saw the Demure TikTok. Is that ringing any bells? So interestingly, this is a perfect example of what happens in pop culture kind of permeating into the adult space. So content creators are very, very smart people. They look at what's trending, kind of globally across the board, beyond social media, Google, whatever. The Demure thing kind of blew up. So what that meant was that people started making content with that word in it, like either in the title or in that theme, because they knew that people were going to start looking for that on Pornhub, which they did. So searches like Demure, mindful pleasure, modest MILF. I don't know what that means, but people were looking for it. So yeah, very, very creative. Another huge one was things like Tradwife. Tradwife content saw a huge surge in searches last year because, again, this was all over the news, right? Things like Ballerina Farm, Nara Smith, like we're all really interested in that when when we're reading the paper, or looking at YouTube, but also when people are looking at Pornhub. So all this to say that, yeah, it's really fascinating. That's one of the things that I find the most interesting working with content creators. We have, upwards of 60,000 people that are regularly uploading content to Pornhub every day, monetizing their content with us, and they're making content that really resonates with what's kind of going on. So this is a little bit what I was talking about before in terms of searches that are more popular by gender. So there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, when it comes to the ladies, especially. People think that porn for women is a thing, and it's actually really not. We actually recently changed in the last couple of years the way that we aggregate content on the site that is for women. We used to have a category that was literally just called that, porn for women. And that was people that were, making the decision to put it in there. So it was things like, really kind of like softcore stuff, the sort of like, very tender. But we found actually, statistically speaking, that is not what women are looking for. If we look at some of these top terms here. So, so go off. I mean, I'm all about it. I think it's really interesting. And like Alonzo said, like the data doesn't lie. So here, yeah, we have a couple of the top categories that are more viewed by men, more viewed by women, and then the ones that are more viewed by women compared to men. So those are like relative searches. So again, if I'm not going to read them all out loud, but you see kind of there's a real nice diversity in there. That wasn't in the contract. Okay, so yeah, this I think is so fascinating. Sort of a shift over the last 10 years when we look at the proportion of female visitors to Pornhub. So I think, again, there's this big misconception that women don't look at porn, right? That's like a guy's thing. That could not be further from the truth. So back in 2015, 10 years ago now, about a quarter of visitors to the site were female. And now, almost 10 years later, at the end of 2024, we saw that figure is actually much closer to 40%. So that's a huge shift, right? Especially when you're thinking about what that looks like spread over 130 million people. So I think this is like very, very cool. A big part of my job that I really love is destigmatizing porn, right? So destigmatizing the idea that, porn looks like a certain thing or is for a certain type of person. It's something that is for sure very private. It's something that people do kind of privately, but expresses, I think, so much about, who we are as people and what we care about and what we find pleasurable and what we find enjoyable, what we find desirable. So I think it's great that we're seeing that proportion of female visitors growing. Here again, we have a little bit of what we look at different age groups. So again, like we see the real diversity when we look at, say, Gen Z. They look at vertical video. So because they're so used to looking at TikTok, right? So same thing here on they're looking at people that are in the ages 18 to 24. Like they prefer that kind of format when they're looking at porn as well. And then when we go all the way down to boomers, so those 55 and up, for whatever reason, they're really more into strap-on porn. I don't know why, but that's the way that she goes.
Raise of hands? No?
Don't be shy, but yeah. So it's so interesting because you see that there really is just like this, again, this diversity, and it's consistent. Devices as well. So when we first started doing this, like these figures were way, way lower. I won't get into like sort of the nitty-gritty of it, but basically pretty much everyone is looking at porn on their phone these days. Very, very few people are looking on desktop or tablet, where you see blue, that's all different, by different countries that are looking on their phone. So make of that what you will, but I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah. So the most viewed categories, yeah, everyone loves this map. This shows essentially which categories are the most popular in different parts of the world. So it's very interesting. I'm from Canada. We love lesbians, yay. But then you kind of see, in different parts of the world, it sort of follows Brazil. They look at Brazilians.
Exactly. Leave it to the French and the Brazilian to look for each other.
But that's something that's consistent. Like when we look at top searches or top categories by different countries, we actually see that people are looking for that is always among the top searches. So in Canada, people look for Canadian. In France, people look for French girl, French guy. They want to kind of spy on each other. It's very funny. So yeah. And then we have this by state as well. You'll notice that some of the states are grayed out. I'll get into that a little bit later on. These are essentially states where we no longer are able to offer service, unfortunately, including here in Florida, in response to some age verification laws. But some really interesting things here. The top relative searches, my personal favorite is in California, friend's mom. I think that's very sweet. Very nice. Yeah, some really, really interesting stuff. South Dakota, they're not very creative, unfortunately. Hot babes. It's yeah, they're there. Nevada, Vegas, funny. Good stuff. So this is a really great example of how we see in real time what happens to traffic on the site. So this is during the Super Bowl, and the shape of this graph looks the same every single year. So this was early this year. It was between Missouri and Pennsylvania, the two teams that were competing. Sorry, I really know nothing about sports. I'm absolutely pretending here, but we see, again, so beginning of the game, traffic is kind of stable, and then goes all the way down right in the middle. It just follows exactly the same trajectory of the game. So it's super fascinating that this is how it goes. But yeah, we saw at one point the traffic dip was upwards of 50%, kind of right at so it's big shifts. And then, this is just by state, sort of same thing. We have a nice history here of what the traffic drops were. I don't know why in 2022, I guess people weren't that interested in it. It was only 15% drop, if anyone remembers that one. And then same thing here. So during the election, people were stressed, guys. They were stressed. So there was a big surge that day, 7% hike during election day. But then when people were waiting for the results, I think this was okay, we're feeling a little nervous before things are coming in, so we're gonna go visit Pornhub. But then while they're waiting, obviously everyone's glued to the news, right? And so they're not on Pornhub, they're waiting for the results, and then after they're either celebrating or not. Big spike, 11% upwards. So again, this was in the US only, this traffic, but big fluctuations. And this, again, it just goes into a little bit more detail state by state. This was in the morning or daytime, and this was in the evening while people were awaiting results. So some pretty considerable drops. The biggest one being in DC, 21%. I guess people were actually working, so that's good.
One more.
There's one more? Okay.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Alex. That's amazing. So I want to start with something that I think was a little bit of a before and after, which is the pandemic, right? For a lot of industries, but especially for the adult industry, I think there was a considerable shift. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what happened, when people went back into their homes and, the studios were closed and, things like that.
Sure. So I can tell you, for one, traffic was way up during the pandemic. Not surprising, especially during that first year. But I think just in terms of what this looked like with creators, this was really when the big boom happened. So obviously platforms like OnlyFans saw a huge surge in people joining and monetizing content, but on Pornhub as well. What I think a lot of people don't know about Pornhub is that it is also a platform where content creators are able to monetize their content with us. So, that market certainly grew, but I think what also happened that's really, really interesting that was kind of reflected here as well when we were looking at some of the insights, is what a porn star is and what a desirable person looks like has evolved so much. And I think that that's what's really interesting about this kind of like democratization or diversification of the adult industry. Before platforms like Pornhub or OnlyFans, we kind of only had the studio system that was available to us, right? So that's a pretty small group of people that were creating, sure, different kinds of content. Absolutely, there were different niches, but it was very much men that were making the content, that were kind of like the studio heads, that were writing scripts, that were coming up with scenarios, that were casting models, more importantly. And so that is still a super important part of the industry. Don't get me wrong. Like the company that I work for, Alo, also owns Brazzers. Love Brazzers. Great site. They make really wonderful content. It's lots of fun. But it has really changed. Like, I think if you think back like 10, 15 years ago, like, what does a porn star look like? I think most people have in their minds like a pretty unilateral idea of what that is. So probably someone who's blonde, pretty thin, who has big boobs. Like that was kind of like the poster girl of the industry. But now with people that are creating their own content at home, we're seeing that that's totally changed. Like that, the model of that sort of former poster girl is still super hot. Still, everyone loves that girl and what she looks like. But then we're also seeing, different body types being represented, different orientation, certainly different races, different ages as well. There's really so many different types of people that are creating content, but also more importantly, that are finding audiences, right? So they wouldn't be creating stuff if they weren't making money. So we're seeing that there is that sort of like really interesting demand and response that's being met. And it's really great because the way that I think about it is like all of these people that are creating content are kind of like small businesses that are able to make money independently doing something that they love. So I think it's really cool.
I want to talk a little bit about sort of Pornhub as a platform.
Mm-hmm.
And, with great power comes great responsibility,
Sure.
right? And so tell us a little bit about a couple of measures in ways that you protect content creators, right? Porn is often associated with trafficking and things that are, coerced and things that are not very
Sure.
nice. And so how is it that you guys are able to help the industry mitigate those things?
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility I think that we bear on that front. One of the things that I wish more people knew about Pornhub is that in order to actually upload anything to the site, you first have to be verified. So that means before you can even think about uploading anything, you need to create a profile. Someone's going to verify that you are who you say that you are with ID. There's a whole scan that happens. And then once that process is done, when you actually go and make an attempt to upload something with that piece of content, you also have to include proof of consent for everybody that's depicted and IDs. So full paperwork for everyone. If it's not included, it's not going to go live on the site. That is not the law. That's not something that we're legally required to do. It's a choice that we've made as a platform that's really trying to be responsible leaders in the industry, and we're really openly encouraging other platforms to follow suit. I think it's, there certainly have been instances on all kinds of platforms, really, where there has been abuse. We're still seeing it today, unfortunately, but I think that this is a method. We were told when we made that decision a couple of years back to do that like, oh, you guys are cooked. Like, you're not going to make money anymore. Like, this is going to be a huge, barrier for you. Like, no one's going to do that. But that couldn't be further from the case. Like, our traffic is still great. We have more creators than ever. That we're helping them when we do make these changes. Of course, it presents changes that they have to be making as well in terms of keeping proper records. But we have educational resources that are helping people to understand how to do that, but also why it's important, because you said that, we're doing that to keep content creators safe, but we also feel a tremendous responsibility to our audience to make sure that when they're coming to our site, that they know that they're engaging with content that is consensually created, that's ethically made. It's people that want to be on the site, that have given their consent to be on the platform, to monetize with us in that way. So yeah, that's just, in a nutshell, kind of what it is. It gets quite complex when we look at sort of the nuts and bolts of what the compliance protocol looks like, because content also gets reviewed against a number of different databases. We work with law enforcement to sort of in a number of different capacities, but primarily we have access to databases that have what we call hashes, so fingerprints of content that is known to be abusive or illegal, and we scan our content against that to make sure that it's not being attempted to be re-uploaded to the site. So again, these are not things that we are being legally compelled to do. It's things that we're choosing to do, that we invest a considerable amount of resources in, that we're continuously expanding. Another part of my role is working with nonprofits, specifically in the anti-trafficking space. So we work with an extraordinary group, for instance, called the Cupcake Girls, that are based out of Nevada, that work in the anti-trafficking space, sort of on the front lines. And what we just came out with a couple of weeks ago, actually, are resources that are for people that are considering getting into the industry, because we know that that is kind of like where there is huge potential for that kind of abuse to happen. So we've created content that says, if this is something that you're thinking about doing, it's not our place to judge, but if you're going to, you should go in with, very open eyes and an understanding of like, these are the risks that could happen. If you're going to make content at home, you have to make sure that you don't have, certain things on the wall that could identify where you are, who you are, that if you're going to choose an agent, for instance, to work with, like this is what a healthy kind of profit sharing system looks like. You should not be giving your banking information to your agent. Like these are all things that, we're really trying to make sure that people have access to in terms of information so that they can make the best choices for their own safety.
We see with a lot of platforms, Netflix, YouTube, Spotify, they're essentially designed to keep you there.
Yeah.
Right? How do you guys does your algorithm protect users from dependency or from, becoming addicts? And how do you guys deal with that?
So it's funny because one of the things that I actually didn't include in the presentation was the average visit on the site typically only lasts about 8 to 9 minutes. People are not staying on Pornhub for that long.
In and out.
In and out. I mean, you do what you got to do. Like it's people are busy. They're scrolling on other platforms, but God knows, like I'd be very embarrassed to show like how many hours a day I spend on Instagram. But on Pornhub, really, like the average site visit is not terribly long. We do have resources on the Wellness Center. So the Sexual Wellness Center is a resource that I'm really, really proud of. It's been up and running for about 7 years now. It's something that we update, I think, 3 times a week. And that's full of content from experts. So from doctors, specialists, therapists, on kind of like a wide range of topics when it comes to sexual wellness. So we really had that in place for another actually really important reason, which is that, we think porn is wonderful at Pornhub. Obviously, it's a great tool for exploration, to sort of explore your desires, see what you're curious about, what you're interested in, but it is not education, right? These are 2 separate things. So that's why we created the Wellness Center that does have educational resources. It's actually run by Dr. Lori Petito, who's a sex therapist. She does a weekly Q&A session. So we actually have users that are able to anonymously submit questions about all kinds of topics. She answers them. So that lives on the Wellness Center.
Thank you. Where my head goes next is, I want to talk about AI, right? It's everywhere. So how is AI affecting, the adult content industry?
I mean, for us, it's very useful when we're looking at things like content moderation. So that for us is where we're primarily using it. It helps us scan content faster. It helps look for certain things faster, sometimes with more accuracy. It also helps us to create transcripts. So one of the things that we also look at is not just what's happening visually, but we also transcribe everything in the moderation process to make sure that the content is compliant in that sense as well. Obviously, we don't expect our moderators to speak every single language that exists, so it'll translate the content into a language that they do speak so that they can make sure that everything's kosher and above board with the content there. But in terms of content creation, I think there's actually some really interesting opportunities that are being made available to content creators through the use of AI. So something that a lot of people are exploring right now is the creation of avatars. And they're really realistic, like kind of like freakishly so. And they're able to make avatars of themselves that they can kind of like put to work for them, right? So that they maybe don't feel like, spending an hour doing glam and spending an hour doing their hair and like figuring out like, what's the script for this one going to be? And I don't feel like cleaning my room so that it looks nice in the shot. They can just kind of make their avatar do it. And there's really, really like incredible, I think, possibilities that are happening on that front. Certainly with that, there's also, the dark side, something like deep fakes. is something that I think people have growing concern over for good reason, which is, again, like one of the reasons why we feel so strongly about needing that sort of paperwork at upload to mitigate that concern. So yeah, it's certainly something that we're keeping a close eye on.
Thank you. I want to get a little bit into those gray states that we saw, and now Florida, which is included in. So can you talk to us a little bit, because it wasn't the actual government's decision to ban Pornhub.
That's right.
On the contrary, you guys decided to, leave and not provide service in those places anymore. Can you tell us a little about the thought process for that, and how do you guys arrive to the decision of essentially losing huge markets?
We're blocked. I think right now in 19 states. There's a handful of others that are coming into effect in July. So basically what's happening, not just in the US, but kind of globally, there's conversations that are happening about age verification. So that means essentially, how are we making sure that underage folks are not engaging with content that they should not be engaging with? So people that are under 18. Primarily it's happening around porn, but we're also seeing it certainly with social media. We're seeing it with gaming. We're seeing it with, the vice sort of industries like alcohol, tobacco, all of these. So how do we do that? It's a really pressing question for sure. I know probably a number of you are parents, and it's an ongoing question of, like, when you hand a kid a phone, like, how do you make sure that they're staying as safe as possible, right? Because of course there's a huge relief in being able to contact each other, like, whenever you want to, and to sort of keep tabs in that way. But then also, like, who are they speaking with, and what kind of content are they engaging with? Are they ready to be looking at that kind of content? So basically what's happening now is states have started to put into effect these laws that are essentially asking people, when they're visiting a porn site, to submit either a driver's license or a passport to engage with the content. So I'm sure that, like, you can understand that there's some serious privacy concerns that we have there. For one, like, I don't know if anyone remembers, but just a couple of years ago, there was like the huge breach with Ashley Madison, right? When there was like lives that got absolutely ruined because that kind of data got leaked. So we do have extremely big concerns that something similar could happen there. Like, if you think about a state like Texas, where on paper, by law, like, it was actually illegal to engage in gay sex there 20 years ago, not 100 years ago, 20 years ago. So, kind of unthinkable. But if you think about what that means, that you're asking somebody who might enjoy that content that then wants to go look at it, but you need to hand over your passport or your ID first, like, not ideal. The other issue is that the way that laws like that are designed are actually very difficult to enforce. When you think about it, there's hundreds of thousands of adult websites out there, right? So how is a government realistically going to be equipped to go after every single site and make sure that, like, they're putting in place the age gate, right? To make sure that they have the mechanism in place to verify ages. It's very, very difficult, if not impossible. And we've tested this. This is certainly not new. These laws have been kind of in different shapes around for about 2 years now. The first state that had a law like this go into effect was Louisiana. So we tested it, and we had relative confidence that it might be okay there, because the way that they were asking to verify was with something called LA Wallet, which was their kind of like digital state wallet. I think they said that, upwards of 80% of folks had this on their phones or using it when they're buying beer at the grocery store or whatever else. But when it came to actually verifying on Pornhub, we saw traffic bounce by upwards of 80%. That means as soon as someone got to the site and said, like, oh, you want to come in here? Great, but we need your ID. They said, absolutely not. And then we saw other sites' traffic go up incrementally as well. We also see huge searches for VPNs go up. Every time that a state introduces a law, it's like searches for VPN. And this is just like on Google Trends. Like, this is like publicly available data. So people are unfortunately finding ways to circumvent the law. And then what that means at the end of the day, ultimately, is that it's not helping to protect kids, which is the concern that we have. So instead, what we're proposing, I'll say very quickly, is a solution on the device, which we do have data is a lot more effective, and stands to actually work with the goal of protecting kids from inappropriate content. So essentially, long story short, it would just be, you do verification once when you set up your device. It's part of your OS in the same way that you have, like, your credit cards are on
your
your
Apple ID.
Exactly. It's kind of in there. So your phone turns into like the lock. If
The key, right.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. Wrong analogy. But essentially, yes, that's right. So that it just kind of, you would have a seamless experience. You can visit any site you want because your phone knows you're over the age of 18. On the contrary, if you don't go ahead with it and you don't do the verification and you give it to a kid, it's not accessible. So that it would lock from jump, like all of the adult sites. It would lock, certain experiences on social media as well. So we have really promising data to show that like this really could be a very viable solution.
Thank you. We're going to go to questions in a minute, but
Okay.
I was hoping that you would tell us a little bit about, what excites you about the future of the adult industry? Like what's coming up that you think is something that's going to become particularly relevant or something that will resonate with people at a larger space and something that really, you guys are working on?
Sure. We have the Pornhub Awards coming up actually in a couple of weeks, which I'm very, very excited about. It's Western themed this year, which I'm like, it's going to be great. But I think, so yeah, we get to, kind of have a fun party and celebrate everyone and their hard work from the past year. But I think that what I'm really increasingly exciting about is just the way that content creators in the adult space are innovating, but also the ways that they're kind of joining these conversations when it comes to destigmatizing, but also educating people. Again, not about sex ed, but about how to sort of, express yourself sexually and how to be more comfortable with your body, how to communicate with your partner. Like these are all things that these people are doing. Bless you. In these really interesting ways. And also we're seeing more and more actually porn stars kind of getting involved in the conversations around age verification, which I think is great because, similarly, like they certainly don't want kids engaging with their content. Like they make content that's for adults by adults. So I think, the next couple of years are going to be really interesting. And I can't wait to see what happens.
Thank you. All right, let's open it up for questions. Who's got a question for Alex today?
Wow. Yeah.
If the site is free, how exactly do you make money?
Ads. It's ad generated content. So basically, people buy ad space on the site. They get access to 130 million people looking at their ads and clicking through and buying products. So that's how we sustain the business.
It's the old adage, if the website is free, that means you're the product.
Yeah.
Hey, right here, Richard. Great talk. I'm all the way back here.
Oh, hello.
Great talk. Great.
you.
So insightful and educational. I is curious about the next 5 years. And for my business, we run call centers. We're starting to replace people with these AI call agents.
Sure.
So could you talk a bit about the future of content creators and whether those will be replaced by AI if you think about 5 years from now?
I don't think so. I think that we're actually looking like in a similar regard for, that's something that we get asked a lot, like for moderation or even for support, like if you're just going to replace everyone with AI. And I think that there's certainly ways that we can use like tools to make everyone's lives a little bit easier, and in some cases make, like I was saying before, content moderation more accurate, faster for sure. But I think when it comes to content creation and there's just something that you can't sort of get out of AI when it comes to like that sort of spark and that sort of uniqueness that each individual creator brings to the table. Like that's something that we hear all the time. Like, how is it possible that every year there's like hundreds more people joining the industry? And it's because every single time that, someone's creating content, it's because they're finding an audience for it. So these are people that are incredibly creative. They're incredibly insightful. They know a lot about desire. They know a lot about sexuality. And I think that they're going to find creative ways to use AI, to your point, to make better work and to make better art. But I really don't see them outrightly replacing sort of the current model.
Hi, Alex. That was
Hi,
great.
thank you.
And the takes a lot of talent to make data really interesting and funny. So well done.
Thanks.
I guess one of the big trends that you presented was just the uptick in female viewers.
Yeah.
Just curious what you guys see as driving that. Is it younger generation? Are viewing more? And if so, why for them? Is that unlocking, I guess, that freedom versus...
For sure. That's a great question. So I do think, we're certainly seeing like Gen Z and millennials, that's kind of like what's making the growth happen, I think there, is that they are, a lot less uncomfortable when it comes to talking about sex and exploring sex. And I think that translates directly to porn viewership. It's certainly part of like their own sexuality. We also have a lot of women that work at Pornhub. And I think that when we have women that are helping to shape the product and have those conversations sort of behind the scenes, it's making a more enticing product for women that they want to engage with. So I do think the fact that we do have, a growing team of women on the team is certainly helping to make the platform more welcoming to women. And like we have a number of things that are coming out in the next couple of months with that exact demographic in mind. So, and I think it's really important to, hire more women. Sure.
Is the ad revenue, in terms of the targeting, are the women as valuable to the advertisers as
Absolutely.
men?
Yeah, for sure. We do let, obviously, advertisers kind of like segment and, choose like kind of what demographic they prefer to have their ads served to. But absolutely, yes.
In the back.
Hi, Alex. Yeah, thank you for being with us. Question from our online audience.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier in the presentation that what happens in pop culture generally, pardon the pun, penetrates into what's happening in the porn industry. And you also mentioned that we're seeing that the ideal porn star, this blonde, thin, big chested individual, that's shifting as well, what the ideal porn star looks like. So do you think that the potential for that to work in reverse is happening, where body image in pop culture can be shifted by what the ideal porn star is? Do you understand kind of where I'm headed there?
I think like it's so interesting, right? Because I think we've seen in the last maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was this huge push for like body inclusivity, right? And having like larger bodies in fashion campaigns and that kind of thing. And now it seems to have gone all the way back, where there's, fashion brands are making less inclusive sizing. They're featuring less, diversity, I think, in terms of body size and shape in their campaigns. Vanessa Friedman at the New York Times wrote a great column about that recently, just kind of like what happened to body inclusivity. So I don't know. I think that it's very different what people sometimes look for and what they are interested in watching on Pornhub, and then what they, like to see in a fashion campaign. It's two different things. So I guess we'll see.
I'd be interested to know any data you might be able to share regarding competition. How much market share does Pornhub have versus other well-known sites? And a corollary question, if you have any data regarding strategy you tried to implement to gain market share from others in terms of things that either worked really well or might have fallen flat.
Sure. Our biggest competitor is Xvideos. So we kind of take turns, I guess, in the top 10, the rank kind of changes. What I will say is, when it comes to trust and safety, I know that's not the sexiest topic necessarily when we're talking about things like compliance, but I think where we're going to continue to win is by making sure that our site is as safe as possible. I really can't say how far it goes. I can't say enough how far it goes when we talk to content creators, especially, that are more and more attracted to our platform because they know that we're investing in that. So I can't give you off the top of my head what the exact numbers look like, but I can say from our side that's really, really where we're making our biggest investment for sure.
Hi there, right here in front of you.
Oh, hey.
Hey there. So those infographics.
Yep.
Wow. I've seen a lot in my day, but I've not seen any like those before. So interesting. So you know a lot about your users, but how much do you really know about your users? 130 million people on your site daily. I mean, do these people have jobs? What are these people doing?
Well, I mean, if you're only on for 7 minutes, that's not that.
I mean, what do you really know about your user? That's one question.
Sure.
And the second question is, what'd you do before this?
I was in school before this. I did a degree in gender and sexuality studies. I mean, we actually, yes, like I like not like Pornhub, but I really loved what I did in school. Actually, a number of my professors were actually sex workers. We studied a lot about like the history of pornography, the history of sex work. So it was like I was very, very lucky. My parents kept saying like, you're never going to find a job with that degree. I did. I'm an executive. Thank you, Mom and Dad. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, like I certainly don't know like the, you know, entire biography of every single person that visits our site, but what we can, I think, ascertain from the data that we see is just kind of like what's popular and what's not and how that changes. It's not really about individuals. I mean, the data it's aggregated and it's anonymized from Google Analytics. So we don't know like if you're visiting the site, like what you're specifically. Oh, well, I guess that's right. No one in the room can visit the site because we're in Florida.
Okay.
We have an ID.
No. But
Thank you. We'll go through your browser history later. Another question in the back.
Over here. Hi. So my question is also about competitors. And I'm surprised nobody's brought it up, but how has the emergence of maybe alternative platforms like OnlyFans affected your business? And what is the strategy there? What are kind of the differences? Do they have the same requirements for age verification?
So that's a question that I get a lot, actually, is OnlyFans a competitor? And the answer to that is no. We actually encourage models to link their OnlyFans accounts to their profiles on the site. The way that I kind of think, or that I like to sort of compare Pornhub, like how it's valuable to a content creator, because it's a free site, is kind of like Spotify. So I'm a Spotify user. I love every Monday I get the Discover Weekly playlist. I don't know if anyone else looks at that, but that's like my favorite thing to start the week with, is it shows me this playlist of songs that it thinks that I will like. And from that, I've discovered lots of different artists that I probably would not have discovered on my own. And, you know, are the streams that I'm doing on Spotify really contributing to that creator's bottom line? No. But what it does do is that it's led me to go to a number of different concerts. So I'm buying tickets, I'm buying merch, I'm supporting that artist in other ways because I discovered them on Spotify. On Pornhub, however, we do actually pay quite well per view. It kind of works very much similar to the way that YouTube does. So creators get like a portion of the ad share from their clicks. But yeah, it's a discovery platform. So people have profiles on the site, they can link to wherever they want to, and we really kind of look at it as like an ecosystem.
Over here.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
How's it going? You talked a lot about the data, about how trends have changed. I'm just curious, given you're one of the largest platforms for the pornographic industry and your parent owns a very large list of them as well. What role do you think you guys play in actually shaping the change in those trends? And is it something that you ever talk about or consider?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we make our data accessible to creators first. So we kind of offer to them a list of what's trending. I think it's like weekly almost. And I think that's really interesting and really important because what we're doing is kind of being like, this is what people are looking for. Go make content with it. Like if, let's say, I don't know, baseball is trending. Sometimes it does. I don't know why. But it's like, figure it out and make something baseball themed because that's what people are looking for right now. And then that will get them more views and make them more money. So I think in that sense, like what we're really trying to do is not so much shape, like we don't really stand to gain or lose anything from certain types of content being more or less popular, but we really are definitely trying to, as much as possible, work with creators and give them tools and information so that they can make the most money possible on the platform.
We've got time for a couple more questions. We've got one here in the front. Oh, sorry,
can you tell us about how the content providers get compensated? You said per click, but like for instance, the number one clip, how much did they make? And what percentage of the content providers make money, and what's the average? You know, the market's down massively, so you might get some new content providers. You know what I mean? So
I know. I was just watching the news before coming, which was probably not a great idea. So we actually have a really competitive rev share model. It's actually better than YouTube. It does. Oh, sorry. I'm super blinded, so I was not sure who was speaking, but it changes depending on sort of. We have like a tiered system, so it's not like the same for everyone. Is the long story short. But I can tell you that our top creator last month earned over $150,000. So it's not pocket change. Obviously, that's not every single person, but there really are great opportunities to make money on the site.
So I have a question regarding royalties, for example, and some of these other like copyright infringement with like other studios, porn studios. So I was wondering how that works. If someone takes a video from some studio and puts it on Pornhub, how does that? Do you
They
pay
wouldn't
them?
be able to, no, because we need the proof of consent and paperwork. So if you're not the owner of that content, you won't have the ability to put it up. Or you can try, but it won't get past compliance.
Okay.
Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
Two things. What's hentai and what's ethical porn?
Two very good questions. Okay, I had to explain hentai to my mom recently, and that was a really fun conversation. Hentai, it's animated content that is like, do you know what anime is? So it's the porn version of anime, essentially. Yeah, and we do actually have a whole formula on how we moderate that as well. It's subject to the same sort of compliance rules as the rest of our content. And your other question was, what is ethical porn? Yes, I think that's such a good question because I think that term gets thrown around a lot as like a buzzword or a marketing tool. And I think to me, like at the end of the day, ethical porn is porn that is created by people that are enthusiastically creating content and making money from it, like period. People have different likes, they have different kinks, they have different desires, and we're not in any place to sort of judge what that looks like. We do, of course, have really strict rules when it comes to what kind of content is and is not allowed on our platform. But beyond that, I mean, I think that, that's the answer. Yeah, it's among the most popular consistently for sure. Yeah.
One last question.
Can I finish up the night?
Yeah.
So I have a question about legislation and
Yeah.
whether or not the porn industry has a voice on Capitol Hill. Do you guys lobby?
Yes, we do. I have lobbied before. Was not on my bingo card last year in terms of like what I was expecting, but we do. We're really, really trying to be on the right side of things when it comes to, specifically right now, I think the big one is age verification. And we're really trying to engage with governments and we're trying to engage with stakeholders, number one, because we have data that can back up the claims that we're making, but also because like we primarily care about making sure that kids are not accessing our platform. And we want to make sure that that's done in a way that's sort of equitable, but also effective. So I'm not sure if there are any lawmakers in the room. Would love to talk to you after if that's the case. But we're really, there's a number of different conversations that are happening in different states and different countries. And we've really been out there, trying to get our voice heard because I think there's a lot of misconceptions that, like, oh, we're trying to hide and like not do the right thing. And it could not be further from the truth.
Before we go, I know that, part of the job also implies, engagement with society and activism. If there was one thing and one message you would like for all of us to take home today, what would that be?
Wow, no pressure. I would say visit Pornhub.com, but you can't.
VPN.
No, I think, just continue to be curious. I think like that's, right now there's so much out there that is asking you to think or to believe certain things when it comes to, certainly to my industry, to the pornography industry. So I would just say like, don't take everything at face value when it comes to certain things that you're reading about us. Like we're all, myself included, like I love talking about this so much, like open book, welcome dialogue of any type when it comes to pornography. So yeah, please reach out.
Please join me in thanking Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.